How about this? We have this tweet from Poster Tubbs who says, Spencer Cox, the Republican governor of Utah, is now officially using the term Latinx in government documents. You can't make this up. And here you can see it says, it just says Latinx. Here's the best part. Take a look at this this is from STL Tribune. Conservative group shares misleading video of Utah Governor Spencer Cox listing his pronouns. The Zoom call was part of a town hall with high school students last spring. Say in April 2021, Zoom call of Spencer Cox, Republican, listing his pronouns during a town hall for high school students has spread on social media after a conservative group shared an edited version of it. How is that misleading? It's literally him sharing his pronouns. They go on to say the original 30-minute Zoom call was part of the one Utah student town hall held last year, where Utah high school students asked the Republican governor questions about the state's COVID-19 response. The edited video makes it appear the governor listed his pronouns right after introducing himself. The statement is followed by the added sound of a sad trombone. During the town hall, one student from Tuacan High School for the Arts in Irvins listed her pronouns when called upon to ask the governor a question. She then asked what his plans were to boost mental health services in schools, citing a survey that found gay and lesbian youth face a higher risk for depression. Well, thank you so much for that question, and my preferred pronouns are he, him, so thank you for sharing yours with me. How is it misleading to show that he literally did that?
He did.
Right.
Because any real Republican would just be like, okay, and then not list their pronouns.
Right. Misleading. Sorry, again, this is a new redefinition. Misleading is something that makes a progressive look bad, regardless of whether it's truthful or not.
Exactly.
Right. So like that used to be. Understand this actually has some reasonable like heritage in English common law. It took a while before like truth was a defense to libel claims. Right. Like that was
really?
some. Yeah, that was actually Alexander Hamilton litigated that case where he was the first, or was a lawyer who finally won the argument in American courts. That's like, hey, I guess we have this First Amendment now, which means that this idea that that truth is not a defense to libel, that can't be right.
Right.
So, but that, it used to be, I forget what the exact term of it, but it's like libel used to be just statements that embarrass someone, regardless of whether or not they're true.
And you could sue for that.
Yeah, you could sue for that. Right.
Back before this?
Before the Constitution, even in the colonial United States.
Got rid of that.
I hope people
Basically,
realize
effectively,
that
people
could
realize
happen
that
again. We could find ourselves in a medieval situation where you get thrown in prison for insult what someone else receives. That's crazy.
That's where we're going.
Shout out to Alexander Hamilton.
Right, yeah.
Hate speech laws.
Great guy. People really, I'm a big Hamilton guy as opposed to a Jefferson guy. Like Hamilton actually like saw what, Jefferson basically wanted us to be an agrarian slave society. He didn't like slavery that much, but he wanted that. And Hamilton was the guy who's like, no, actually, we should have a really powerful country. In general, like America should be strong.
Well, so going back to the main story, though, this is just another very common and typical erosion among Republicans who give in immediately because they're spineless.
Yeah, no, I usually joke that name a more useless Republican than Mitt Romney, right? Who's I love that tweet because everybody engages with it and lists more useless Republicans. So, but yeah, like Utah, what's going on with Utah, guys? Like this is a red state, and we have this wackadoodle liberal governor and a wackadoodle rhino senator. Like,
Also,
get your stuff together.
Imagine insulting yourself on that level, being a man, but telling people that you expect to be referred to as he, him, as if they wouldn't otherwise know. What a ridiculous self-own.
I would, if like I was in a situation where for whatever reason they were like, you have to list your pronouns, I would absolutely just make up some really long and ridiculous word and be like, do it or don't.
Fascinating thing about pronouns is it's like, it comes out when you're not there. Right. How often do you like, oh, he and like they're not in the room? It's like the only reason you use third person pronouns is because you're not talking to that person.
Right.
Right. So it's like you want to control how I think about you when you're not here.
That's the craziest thing.
Which is you're right. You're actually doing violence against me if you don't think about me the way I want to be thought of.
Ezra Miller, the Flash in the DC cinematic universe or whatever it's called.
No.
Ezra Miller came out as non-binary, so all the news articles say they, them. And it's like,
you're butchering the English language.
But it's not even that. Like Ezra Miller, as my understanding, is not trans. Like just came out and said, you have to call me they, them. And they're like, okay. Like, I understand if there's an argument for a trans woman who is overtly passing. And it was like what Ben Shapiro was saying about Blair. It would be very difficult or take a long time to explain why we'd use a male pronoun for Blair White in public to his friends. So he would just say she, her. It's the easiest way to go about things. But in literary or in articles, he would say he, him. And I'm like, I understand that point. I understand why it is simpler just to refer to someone as she, her if they're overtly feminine, or he, him for a trans man who's overtly masculine, like Buck Angel, for instance. But when we're talking about some guy who's like, I'm non-binary, but he's still just a regular, young man, you can't just tell people I have to refer to you in a certain way. You don't own that. That you exist outside of, I exist, okay? You exist over there. I've never seen you, and yet I'm supposed to refer to him by pronouns. I never met the guy.
Well, I don't know if you know this, Tim, but as it turns out, you get to define your identity without anyone around you having to consent to it, even though by definition your identity is how you fit into the group that you're interacting with.
Human society.
Yeah. It's like the group that you're interacting with has absolutely no say in how you're perceived. It's completely all up to you.
Yeah,
and if they disagree with that, they're just mean. In
until
fact, they're
realism
violent.
kicks in and the Ukrainian government's turning trans women back that can't, because they're actually men that are now trans women, or they converted. We need the strong muscle on the front. I don't care how you identify.
Yeah, there's always something interesting. Like sometimes the pro-trans lobby, if you will, points to certain societies. Say, look, there's an example of how this society has recognized trans people, and it's like the reason for that particular society is because they're so homophobic that the only way that you can be gay is if you transition.
In Ukraine, a female to male transgender person dressed up in women's clothing and then crossed the border to escape because I guess now, identifying as a woman, she didn't want to go to war. And because of hormone therapy presented as male, and would have got stopped at the border and then sent to go fight. I find that fascinating. Then you have basically, no matter what the circumstances, that you have trans women and trans men just trying to justify escape from the country in whatever way they can. The trans women are like, but I'm actually, a woman, so I should be allowed to leave, but they're not letting me. And the trans man is like, time to dress up like a woman and say I'm a woman so I can get out of here. Like, if you want to be a man, that comes with the pros and the cons of being a man. Conscription has always been one of them. But, this is one of the big things that we saw in the turn of the century with the suffrage movement. The women who opposed it were like, we don't want male responsibilities in our lives, right. Which include, I believe, like the fire brigade was one issue in some areas. Yeah. If you had having the right to vote meant that you'd be called upon as a man to fight in the fire brigade. And
they believed they could be drafted. That was something that they feared.
Right. And they will be.
Yeah, because they will be next time. Because if we ever have a draft again, people are just going to identify as women to get out of the draft. It'll be an easy form of draft.
That's a very good point.
Right? And so you'll very quickly have to start drafting women too.
Did you hear about what's going on? Was it Pasadena? Where is it? Where they're going to be giving UBI to people who are non-binary?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is. I was just thinking about that, and I was going to bring it up. I think this is a brilliant bill for our cause, frankly, because they're only allocating about $200,000 to this program, which means they're going to run out very quickly.
Everyone will get a buck.
And it's impossible to define non-binary because it's a non-existent, meaningless term. So a bunch of people are going to say they're non-binary to get the money, and it's going to run out extremely quickly, and people are going to see how ridiculous it's just going to be another demonstration of how nonsensical the modern gender theory BS is.
Man, my dad was a fireman growing up, and I went to the fire department in some of the early 90s. I think I was like 12 or 13, and there was a woman that worked there, and I was like, hey, how come there's a girl that's a fireman? And he was like, oh, because women can be firemen too. And I was like, well, wouldn't she be called a firewoman? He's like, no, they're all called firemen. And then when I went to college, it was like, yeah, we're all actors. Men and women, we're all considered actors. We don't use the word actress. It's ridiculous. So I got it. I mean, it doesn't really matter what you call it. It's more about who you are. And I was like, can she carry the heavy equipment? And he was like, no, she works at the desk. But not that she couldn't carry the heavy equipment, she trained for it. But it was more about like less what you call yourself and more what you actually are. That's what it comes down to when the crap hits the fan, my friends.
I've never really cared about, the words people use to describe me. It's the weirdest thing that people are like, you have to use someone's pronouns or else, but we're going to insult you and call you names all day and night. Like, no. You can't insult me. I have dictated the words you must use to describe me.
That Bill 616.
Remember, so anybody,
it's that Matt Walsh point.
That's the thing. Yeah, it's violence and abuse to misgender someone, to not use the proper pronouns, but to try to have secret conversations with children about sexually depraved behaviors, that's not grooming.
Right.
Dude, isn't it illegal in Canada to do that now? Bill C-16? And then they passed another one that Jordan Peterson was talking about. I didn't look into it yet, but apparently, like, if you misuse someone's pronouns, it can be a hate speech crime. This is insane. Yeah. Hopefully, I'm not if I'm miscalculating this, let me know in the super chats or something.
Yeah, no, there's some bill in Canada that's like dictating independent media or whatever. I think Jordan Peterson was tweeting about it. They want to control what reporters and people with large media platforms can say. That's where it's all headed, because you saw what the CEO of Twitter said years ago that we have to, it's not about free speech. It's about how the times are changing and we have to create a healthy conversation. And it's just like, these people are definition megalomaniac, sociopath, psychos, all that stuff. My worldview is the only worldview. My worldview is moral and just, and everyone must adhere to the way I see things. That is psychotic behavior.
And sometimes it'll be the way we see things. They'll do that cult thing where it's like me and a bunch of other weirdos that have my same mentality. So we are stronger in numbers.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.